Good morning. Welcome to Unity of Boulder. We like to get started this morning with that noise, with a song. So we're going to change up the order a little bit. So you are invited to sing with us if you like, or you'd like to just listen and enjoy the music. You can do that as well. But the words will be up on the screens here. So now that we have brought the strength of love into this space, we'd love for you to stand up and say good morning to each other. Give your name to the next person next to you.
I'll just hold this down. Okay.
Hello, test.
We got a few announcements this morning that we'll get through as quickly as possible here, but important announcements. I don't know if anyone has had a chance to vote yet. Raise your hand. Have you voted for Boca Gold yet? So we have won Best Place for Worship the last 3 years. Thank you so much for your support in that. We'd love to win it the 4th year in a row. Wouldn't that be cool? Please vote for us. You can go to unityofboulder.com/vote. I put the link there so it's nice and easy to get to. But if you do need help, I'll be out in the lobby after the service to assist you with that. Also, next week we have Angel Camp. If you have grandchildren or children that you think would like to attend. My kids are so excited about this second session. They're already planning their dance for the talent show. It's so fun, and it meets 9 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Monday through Friday next week. It's not too late to sign up. It's $125, and per kid, actually 75 per additional kids. The first kid's $125. The hike today has been unfortunately canceled due to rain and lightning and the works, so we're not going today, but we will keep you posted on the next one. Our community outreach project this next week, this Saturday, is going to be cleaning up the Bear Creek Park. It's going to be nice, light duty. It's going to be easy. You can bring kids if you want to help. But see Heather in the office if you'd like to volunteer to help us with that. Also, a Dr. Felicia Santelli, is she here today? Ah, she is. Did you want to tell some people about your awesome Take Back Your Power workshop? Or do you want me to? Okay, she's coming up. You want me to do it? Okay, I'll do it. I hope I do it justice. So she's the founder of the Santelli Healing Center, and she's going to help you guys in this workshop to balance the spirit, body, and mind, and to get your strength back for your immune system, to strengthen your immune system. How'd I do? Was that okay? All right, good. So that's at 1:30 next Sunday. You can sign up in the bookstore if you'd like to join her for that workshop. Also, just a reminder about the camp out, not too late to register for that. That's August 5th through 8th. It is in a beautiful campground by the Poudre River, and this place is amazing. We go to the Shambhala Center for a little field trip. We do yoga every morning and meditation. We share food. It is amazing, and we share music, which is really fun. So come register for that at unityboulder.com/campout, or you can do it in the office as well. And that's it for announcements. I'd like to bring Steve out here to get us started with the prayer.
Good morning. I encourage you to, if you feel comfortable, go ahead and close your eyes and relax into your seat. Today, let us remember that God is love. Father, Mother, God, we are so grateful that your love is in the very air that we breathe. Your love is in the very air that we breathe. Take a moment now and breathe in the love of God. Affirm with me. I am healed. I am nurtured. I am loved just the way I am. Breathe into that. I am loved just the way I am. Father, Mother, God, we are again so grateful that in the pause, in the silence, in our prayers, there is an unending supply of your love available to us. Today, let us remember God is love. And to this we say, amen.
Thank you, Steve. If you would like prayer support after the service, we have prayer partners who will pray with you and take you down to our beautiful meditation room. So if you would like support, feel free to stay in your seat after the service, and our prayer partners will come find you. But we are going to sing a song called When I Pray, and you're welcome to sing that with us again. Or if you'd like to just go into a meditative space, that's great as well. When I pray, I feel my heart go deeper, my heart go deeper into my God. When I pray, I feel my heart go deeper, my heart go deeper into my God. Right here, right now, right where I am, I pray. Right here, right now, right where I am, I pray. When I pray, I feel my soul go deeper, my soul go deeper into my God. When I pray, I feel my soul go deeper, my soul go deeper into my God. Right here, right now, right where I am, I pray. Right here, right now, right where I am, I pray. When I pray, I feel my love go deeper, my love go deeper into my God. When I pray, I feel my love go deeper, my love go deeper into my God. Right here, right now, right where I am, I pray. Right here, right now, right where I am, I pray. When I pray, I feel my heart go deeper, my heart go deeper into my God. And now we will hear from our guest musician, Louis Coliana, his beautiful pianist.
Well, I want to thank Louis for that beautiful music. And he will be out front. You're going to hear another song of his, but he'll be up front after the service if you want to meet with him, buy one of his CDs. He's also got a project he's working on, which you'll see a slide later on in the service talking about that. Quite amazing. Let's hold on to that energy and just kind of go into an opening meditation here. Keep that beautiful music just flowing through your soul as you close your eyes. You allow your shoulders to relax, and you breathe. You breathe into the silence. You breathe into the peace. You breathe into this moment. You recognize the stillness. And now you sit with open mind and open heart as both student and teacher, accomplishing both by simply being still and listening. And so it is. Well, I want to give a special thank you to our YOU, our teenagers, who did the car wash yesterday. Did anybody else get their car washed yesterday? A few hands. All right, good. They did a great job. Yeah, you can applaud for that. Anytime a teenager volunteers, you should applaud. You should applaud and you should support that. And Melinda, their group leader, did a fantastic job organizing that and helping out with that. She was slaving away out there with them. And I will be helping you guys with that cleanup next Saturday. I'm going to be there with Erna, and we're actually bringing some friends of ours from Las Vegas. I'd love for you to meet. So if you can make it out to that, that'd be a great thing, and we'll have some fun. All right, most important thing to accomplish today, I need you to see this. Yeah, Unity socks. You have never seen a minister with Unity socks, right? Come on. Right, it's going to take off. You're going to see it all the time now, but just know you saw it here first. It's very important. All right. Well, they were actually selling these at the last convention, so there are probably some other ministers with Unity socks this Sunday, but I just got them this week. What great timing. I get to wear them. Okay, that was the most important thing I had to offer today. Everything else just sort of goes downhill from there. Does anybody else want to talk about my socks a little bit more? Oh, wow. No, we don't have them available in the bookstore yet, but maybe we could. Pre-orders coming in now, live on stage. All right, let's get to something less important. Is anyone not familiar with the term frenemy? Frenemy, a person with whom one is friendly despite a fundamental dislike or rivalry. This has become a common term with the younger generations, especially in the world of social media, where a lot of people put on a fake persona online, and they might pretend to be your person, but then they're making fun of you, or they're making jabs about you when you're not around, or so they're your frenemy. They're your friend and sort of simultaneously your enemy. That's the new school way of it, but I remember just having friends that were jerks growing up, and they were frenemies. We just didn't bother to have a term for it yet, so it's nothing new. Anybody else ever have a frenemy? Come on. Yeah, friends that are jerks. Anyway, you need to know that to get this. Keep your friends close and your frenemies closer. All right, I wanted to make sure we were familiar with this word because I'm doing a 2-week series here, and the talk title is My Ego is My Frenemy. So I'll be speaking today about it, and then I'll be wrapping it up next week with this topic. So let's get right into it. A few weeks ago, Erna actually said to me, oh, I just found this article you've got to read. And so she forwarded me the article. It wasn't a physical thing. That doesn't happen anymore. She didn't hand me a piece of paper. She forwarded it to me, so it was a digital format there. That is possible for you wondering how that's possible. She forwarded me this article, and as soon as I read the headline, I knew I was going to have to do a talk about it. It was too perfect. And it's actually something that has been on my mind for many years, especially as a minister, something that I've observed. And so when I saw it, I said, okay, it must be time for me to talk about it. I've thought about talking about it for a while, but now there's this article, it seemed like it was definitely time to do it. So we're going to do that today. So here is the headline of the article. Yoga and meditation could give you an ego boost, a new study suggests. Good, some of you see the issue. That's good. So just reading that headline, let me ask you, is an ego boost a good thing or a bad thing? Raise your hand if you think it's a good thing. Not so much, all right. Let's just make sure our arms are working though. Raise your hand, let me see if the arms are working, just so if I ask for the, okay, they are working, okay. So we actually didn't think an ego boost was a good thing, because last service we couldn't get this joint working. We had to get some WD-40 out, and we were spraying some shoulders. The elbows started working before the shoulders. All right, let's see how this article unfolds, because it is actually a fun read, and we're going to do that today. This is from theinsider.com, referring to a study, and it says, the team from the University of Southampton conducted 2 experiments. In the first, they recruited 93 yoga students and followed them over a period of 15 weeks, regularly asking them about their sense of self-enhancement. Now, self-enhancement is sort of a clinical term or a marker they use to gauge someone's ego, or the amount of someone's ego, or their ego identification in that moment. So you can say self-enhancement equates to your amount of ego. So that's to help you understand that. So it goes on. It says the yoga students were asked to compare themselves to the average student in the class, then to answer questions that assessed their narcissistic tendencies and self-esteem. Those who were studied the hour after a yoga class had significantly higher self-enhancement than those who hadn't practiced it in 24 hours. So researchers are saying what they found was the more recently we have practiced yoga, the bigger our ego is. It's a little counterintuitive, wouldn't you think? Now, it is important to note that they never actually distinguish what type of yoga they're talking about, and those of us in the spiritual movement know there are many, many types of yoga. So they're using yoga in sort of the Western definition we use to sort of refer to just the catch-all of all yogas that refer to physical poses and stretching types of yoga. But we know that there's meditation types of yoga and mental yogas and all different yogas. So they're obviously referring to the physical yogas like Hatha and Vinyasa yoga. So we're going to continue on here. We'll just kind of have to accept that. In the second experiment, the researchers followed 162 meditators for 4 weeks. So if you're a meditator and you don't do yoga and you thought you were safe, they're coming for you. They were asked similar questions to the yoga students, and the results showed a similar pattern, that they had a higher self-enhancement in the hour following meditation compared to those who hadn't meditated in a day. So whether it be yoga or meditation, the more recently we did it, the bigger our ego is. And for some of you, you might wonder, what is the issue here? So I'm going to get you up to speed if you're new to Unity and you're new to a spiritual experience or path. By and large, the ego is considered something that we want less of in the spiritual movement. As a matter of fact, in most spiritual paths or modalities, the goal is to abolish the ego and to rise above the ego or out of the ego, because the ego is our adversary on the spiritual path. So if you're in a Course in Miracles student, you're quite familiar with this adversary because it's talked about a fair amount. So we can read this from A Course in Miracles. The ego is idolatry, the sign of limited and separated self, born in a body, doomed to suffer and to end its life in death. It is the will that sees the will of God as enemy and takes a form in which it is denied. The ego is the proof that strength is weak and love is fearful. Life is really death, and what opposes God alone is true. The ego is insane. In fear, it stands beyond the everywhere, apart from all, in separation from the infinite. In its insanity, it thinks it has become a victor over God himself, and in its terrible autonomy, it sees the will of God has been destroyed. Not a very shining example. If that was somebody's personal review of you, you might feel a little bit down about yourself. So if you are on the spiritual path and you read something like that, then you come to the conclusion that, yes, the ego is something that needs to be dealt with, obviously. There are some stark results presented there. So you can see how that would motivate a movement or motivate a person to work on their ego and do something about it. And this is one of the fundamental goals of yoga and meditation, is to deal with this rampant ego as described there. So to hear that these practices of yoga and meditation might actually be increasing our ego, now that is not good news for us on the spiritual path. That is sort of counterproductive to what we've been trying to accomplish. Okay, so I feel like we're sort of all on the same page now about the ego. So let's go into the part of this study, if it hasn't happened yet, that's going to really bother you. This is fun. Evidently, neither yoga nor meditation quiet the ego. Instead, they boost self-enhancement, the authors concluded in the paper. Before we get much further, is anyone else a bit bothered by this study and its oversimplified conclusion? Anyone? That's why I love it. It should bother us a little bit. And if I had done this study, my goal would be to bother people too. And clearly they were going in that direction. And I find this often to be the case with studies that attempt to look at spiritual phenomena or dip their head into the spiritual world. They often wind up with sort of these gross conclusions that are unfair, not very well done. But that is a different conversation for a different talk at a different time. I want to continue with what we have here with this study because there is some value in it. And the study might sound like it's all bad news, but the person writing the article about the study does give us a breadcrumb to try to help us feel a little bit better about ourselves after reading this. This is what they say. But before you start feeling bad about your yoga and meditation routine, self-enhancement doesn't have to be seen as negative. The results also showed that participants with increased self-enhancement also had increased well-being. Interesting. Now we are starting to touch on something that I think is worth talking about. Can a bigger ego actually support and increase your well-being? That's sort of an uncomfortable statement to even think about in the spiritual movement, especially after we've read what the ego is from A Course in Miracles. How could this be? How could this actually bolster our well-being, this horrible anti-God entity that's within us? Okay, well, let's see where this takes us. Let's play this little game here. And I want to start by breaking this down logically. A lot of times to have a logical situation, if you can try to prove something to be true, you have to also prove that the opposite is true. If this result is true, then perhaps the opposite of it also must be true. If an inflated ego can actually support your well-being, then the opposite must also be true. So let me ask you this. Does a person who has had their ego crushed tend to not feel well? Okay. When your ego has been hurt, does your overall well-being decrease? It seems to be the case. When you are embarrassed, ashamed, depressed, or in a state of self-loathing, your overall well-being suffers. That tends to seem to be the case for us, does it not? So if a damaged ego decreases your well-being, would it not make sense that a little self-enhancement or a little ego boost actually helps or increases your well-being? After all, an increase in self-enhancement is actually a pathway to what we call self-esteem. And we're usually pretty much agreeable on the fact that self-esteem is a good thing to have in a human being, because those without self-esteem tend to struggle in many ways in this life. Now, I don't know about you, but there have been times in my life when a little ego boost really did make me feel better about myself. And the fascinating thing is, when I feel better about myself, my physical well-being follows suit. Has anyone else ever noticed that? When you feel better about yourself, your physical well-being starts to follow suit. Interesting. So I'm going to give you an example from my personal life. For those of you that don't know, I was a sound engineer for the majority of my life. I actually started in this church as a sound engineer, and I went on to college, and I got a career in it. I did that for many, many years. And I applied for a job at the MGM Grand Hotel when I was living in Las Vegas, and I got that job after a lot of effort. And I actually joined the corporation which owns 11 or 12 properties on the Strip in Las Vegas. And when I joined that crew, I quickly realized that the knowledge and skills required for that position was way out of the range of what I currently had. There was a considerable amount of knowledge and skill that you had to have. So I was a sound guy, but I was not a sound guy like these guys were that I had just joined. These guys were mixing concerts in arenas and stadiums. This was the caliber of people I had just joined. So I had to be shown everything when I got that job. I had to be told everything. I had to be supervised everywhere I went when I started that job. One, because it was highly dangerous. We dealt with 220 volts electricity on a daily basis. We hung speaker stacks that weighed several tons that were hanging over audience members' heads, which meant there was a lot of liability involved in that. And we were dealing with sound pressure levels that were so loud that we actually had restrictions on how much damage we could do to the human ear, and we had to be learning about these things. So, and there was also, the second part of it was the stakes were very high. We were dealing with high-end VIP clients, and we didn't have room for error or messing up. So I was not left alone when I started. So often I felt incapable, I felt inadequate, and embarrassed around the people I was working with. Before I was hired, I thought I was a very capable sound engineer. I thought I was pretty good at what I did. When I got hired, I realized I wasn't even playing in the same ballpark as these guys and girls. And I was constantly humbled by how little I actually knew. But as my skills increased and my knowledge increased working with the crew, my confidence increased. And over time, I was actually the one that was training the new people coming onto the crew. And as my confidence and my skills increased even more, eventually I was the one hiring the new people coming onto the crew. There is no doubt that I felt better about myself as time went on and the more I grew and knew. You could say my self-enhancement increased as I worked there. You could say that my self-esteem increased as I worked there. Would you say that that is a bad thing? No, it's not a bad thing. Okay, what if I told you my ego also increased while I worked there? Not so quick to answer, are we? See, this is probably harder for us to agree with because of our relationship to the word ego. This is because we have historically been quick to vilify the ego in our spiritual practice, to sort of use it as a common enemy that we can all rally behind and say, yes, together we're against the ego, charge. But in Unity, we recognize that the ego actually serves a valuable purpose in our lives. Not just our physical lives, but our spiritual lives. But if you think about the ego, we would not be standing here today without the ego. The ego is what has helped us to survive for thousands of years. The ego is the only reason we have children. Why would we care to spread ourselves onto the future if we didn't have an ego? Why would we care to even survive, to eat, to drink water, to hunt, to farm? These things are because of the ego. It's a self-sustaining organism within us that actually does us more help than harm in many ways. So let's get a better understanding of the ego from our co-founder, Charles Fillmore. This is from The Revealing Word. It's a book that sort of defines common terms in the Unity way. So we're defining ego. He said, the I. The ego is man, and by reason of his divinity, he makes and remakes as he wills. In this lies his greatest strength and his greatest weakness. The ego of itself is possessed of nothing. It is a mere ignorant child of innocence floating in the mind of being, but through the doors, through the doors of its consciousness must pass all the treasures of God. So let's think about this. God created everything. And whether you want to call it divine, whatever you want to call it, pretty much every religion agrees God created everything. And God is in and through everything. God is omnipresence. God is omniscience. That means God is in and through everything. We sort of agree on that. Ergo, God created the ego. Ergo, God moves in and through the ego. The ego creates our personal identity, our reality. We sit here as an individualized expression of God because of the ego. Without the ego, there would be no individualized expression of God. There would just be nothing. Right? It is the ego that creates this beautiful, creative difference between all of us that we so celebrate today, that we all have our own little special gifts to share. But the ego in and of itself is nothing. That is what Charles Fillmore is saying. Until we infuse it with creative power and direction, it is nothing. But God flows through the ego. It has to. God flows through all things. Therefore, God has to flow through the ego. So why then would we seek to destroy it? Would we seek to destroy God? An ego boost feels good. Am I wrong? It feels good. And by design, I believe it is supposed to feel good. Do you think helping another person in need has no ego attached to it? We love to throw around the term a selfless act. But we get a little boost out of helping other people. We get a little ego boost out of helping other people. And do you really think that the ego gets nothing out of the exchange of helping another person? Of course it does. And thank God it does, because it's the ego that drives probably most people to go help other people. It is that ego boost that they desire and that they crave that they get from helping another person. Thank God that exists. So when I first showed up for ministerial training at Unity Village, probably 6 or 7 years ago now, I wandered into a class, and here we were, about 30 students sitting there, all of us prospective future Unity ministers, all very excited about our future. And the teacher stood up and he said, "Why are you here?" Various answers from, well, I had a calling, and he let people describe their calling, and some people say, you know what, I just love the Unity message and we need to spread it out there to save the world, and it was this and it was that. And he said, those are all beautiful answers, but they're all incorrect. You're here because of your ego. What else but the ego thinks it would actually have something to teach somebody else? And he said, and thank God it exists, because you will do incredible things because of that ego. Thank God it exists because every single day people step out of their house and do something incredible because of their ego. And that was a shock to us, because all of us, like most of us here, probably have always heard the ego is this horrible thing we have to vilify and get rid of. So we sat there going, am I really here because of my ego? I don't like the sound of that. But when we really got down to it, he might be right. The ego, in and of itself, possesses nothing. You infuse it with purpose, power, and direction. So yes, sometimes the ego is overly inflated. There is no doubt about that. But on the same token, sometimes the ego is abused and suppressed, and the person is hurting because of it. And thus, Unity actually recognizes two states of consciousness of the ego. So we're back to the revealing word. This is page 61. Now we're defining adverse ego. When the ego attaches itself to sense consciousness, this is the consciousness of the physical world, the desires for the things of the physical world, Then it builds the Antichrist man who has no basis in reality. This is known as the adverse ego. It is the adverse ego that causes all the trouble in the world. Its selfishness and greed make men grovel in the mire of materiality when they might soar in the heavens of spirituality. Now we have its counterpart, spiritual ego, the true self, an individualized center of God consciousness. I am conscious identity. It is the individualized expression of God. That's what we are here to do. That's what we are currently doing. Otherwise, there would be nothing. It would be just God, like it was before the Big Bang, or whatever theory you want to attach to that. There would be nothing. But we are sitting here because we are individualized expressions of the divine. So the adverse ego, sometimes referred to as ego's lower nature. You might have heard Santisha or Jack refer to it in that way, the lower nature of the ego. This is the overinflated ego. This is the ego that works against you, that is bringing you down, that is making you do the things that you do not want to be doing, that is creating more suffering and pain in your life. But then there is the spiritual ego, or what we sometimes refer to as the higher nature of the ego. This is the healthy, balanced ego, supporting and working with you, supporting and working for you. This is the ego that gets you out to a volunteer activity, even though it might be raining, even though it might be hot, even though it might be uncomfortable, but you know it's the right thing to do. And it says, get off your hiney and go do it. That is the higher awareness of the ego. That is the higher expression of the ego that gets you to go do something, because it says you're going to feel good after you do it no matter the conditions there. We're going to get a boost. It's a win-win. Let's go do this. Now, it might be hard for us to imagine a positive side to the ego because we've spent so long vilifying the word ego and attaching it to everything that's wrong in the world. We watch it playing out in global crisis, in global war, in starvation and famine. We watch it in racism. We watch it in the political injustice that we see every day, conflict and social injustice. We see this lower nature of ego playing out all around us. Yes, that form and expression of the ego needs to stop, and we recognize that. Everyone does. But there is also a time and a place when the ego needs to be lifted up, when it needs a boost. So I want to give you another example from my history, actually here in Boulder. I went to junior high at Baseline Junior High, up off Baseline, when it used to be Baseline Junior High. Now it's New Vista High School, which breaks my heart. My junior high's gone. Anyway, that's my personal process I'm going through. Sorry I laid that on you. So here I was at Baseline Junior High. I don't know, I was probably in 8th grade. And I was doing one of the sports activities in the back. We had the fields out there. And my mom came to pick me up. And I think I was tearing up, and she said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "None of the girls like me." And so I was broken inside. I was feeling down inside. I was feeling down on myself. I didn't feel very pretty. Now, if you know, my mother is Norma Groverland. She is no-nonsense unity through and through. Do you know what she said to me? She did not tell me in that moment that you need to evolve beyond your ego desire to be recognized by girls. That is not what she told me in that moment. No, in that moment, she recognized what was really needed. My mother said, "That's not true. They think you have beautiful eyes." What an amazing discovery that was for me. Here I had been worrying about my clothes, my haircut, how I talked, the friends I hung out with. It was making an impression on the girls. And after all that, it was my eyes that were my selling point. I need to work these eyes better. You see, in that moment, it was not the time to teach me a lesson. I was hurting. I didn't feel good about myself. It was simply the time, and she recognized to just give me a little bit of ego boost, to put me back into the game so I could take a little bit more, so I could keep playing, so I keep moving on. If you think about when people fall in depression, I bet many of us or friends and family, we've seen that happen. People fall into a pit of depression. Perhaps they've had a loss, or perhaps they feel like they're an outcast by this insane delusional society that we've created. In that moment, there is no doubt there is a lesson to be learned. But that lesson is really hard to recognize when the ego has collapsed. Tell me I'm wrong. That lesson is really hard to recognize when the ego is collapsed. And if you step up to a person in that headspace and say, there's a lesson to be learned here, they're going to punch you right in the kisser. Am I wrong? There is a time and a place. Consider that the ego needs to be repaired or even boosted in order for them to return to a headspace where they're open to the possibility of learning a lesson. In that moment, they are not there. They need a little ego boost. They need to be lifted up. Sometimes you just need an ego boost to carry on, to stand up and to face a difficult situation again. Now, after my mom said that about my eyes, I felt so much better at school. From that point on, when I saw a girl even look in my general direction, I thought, she's getting caught in the tractor beam of my gaze. And the truly amazing part that makes me laugh when I think back on it, it took me about a year to figure out my mom had made that up. At one point I realized, how could she possibly know what the girls at my school think? She's never talked to any of them. But in that moment, she had instilled in me more confidence. And it stuck with me even after I realized it wasn't true. Because it was given at the right time. The boost was given at the right time to get me back into the game so I could keep growing and expanding. Had she tried to teach me a lesson in that moment, I probably would have rebelled against whatever she had said and gone further down and away from the direction she knew I needed to go. The ego is not all good or all bad. There is a time and a place. And for those of you that thought this was strictly from a song, it's actually from Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to pluck up what is planted. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to break down, and a time to build up. A time to weep, and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to throw away stones, and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. I love that one. We could really study that one. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. Why do I hear laughter backstage? Somebody knows me back there. A time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. There is a time and place for every matter under heaven. That's how it started. Think about that. Traditionally, we're going to think under heaven as, oh, heaven's up above us, so everything happening under heaven, there's a matter and there's a time. But we know in Unity, and we know it actually says in the Bible that heaven, the kingdom of heaven, is in the midst of you. So now when you think about, for everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven, thinking that heaven is in the midst of you, it requires you to go a little bit deeper. There is a subtle and delicate equilibrium that needs to be established in our lives. There's a state of being in the universe that calls us towards balance. I can't think of anything in nature that is better off for having destroyed its solution, destroyed its adversary. It always returns to balance. It's always looking for balance. The planet does not wipe out all predators. The planet seeks to come to a healthy balance whenever that is the case. We are going to dive deeper into this concept next week, and I'm going to give you what I feel will be a very helpful tool in next week's sermon to help you navigate not only your spiritual life, but your physical life. Because again, it is about balance, the spiritual and the physical. How often we are so fixated on one or the other, but it is a balance. And this is a tool that is going to really help you. And if you think there's someone you know that might benefit from a tool like that, I encourage you to invite them to come with you next week. But to finish up today, let me leave you with these words. Words from the Prince of Peace, Jesus Christ. From Matthew, do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. How could the Prince of Peace say such a thing? Think about it and join us next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. And that is the truth as I experience it. Thank you. We're going to take an offering for Unity now, and I'd like to remind you that traditionally we see an offering as giving away of something, releasing something, letting go of something. But I invite you to switch your consciousness around that and start to see this as an investment into something we want to create collectively. We are attempting and we are accomplishing the transformation of humanity and the consciousness therein. So today we are investing in the transformation of human consciousness. So we're going to bless this offering with this offering statement. I will say it first, and then you can repeat it after me. Divine love is my true life and my conscious destiny. Therefore I give. Together, please. Divine love is my true life and my conscious destiny. Therefore I give. And we have the opportunity to listen to the beautiful music of Lewis yet again.
I would just like to say thank you so very much for inviting me to be part of your community today. I really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoy my music. Thank you.
So please go talk to Lewis and buy one of his CDs in the lobby. And if you're here for the first time, we want to welcome you. So please, after our closing song, come find me in the fellowship area, and I'd like to meet you and discuss anything with you. We can talk about socks if you're into that kind of thing. All right, we're going to rise and have our closing song, and we're going to hold hands towards the center aisle. If holding hands is not your thing, you can just stay where you are. Otherwise, come join me. Just hold that right there for a moment. Send that peace around the world. Feel this. Make it a reality. Amen.
Yeah, it's happening right now. Sound. Yeah, just hang on a second. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead and play. Josh, go ahead.